Everyone, welcome to St. Paul's Episcopal Church and to the 2023 Lenten Lunch and Speaker Series. My name is Charlie Dupree, and I am the rector of St. Paul's. If you're here for the first time, welcome. If you are returning, welcome back. I know that this series and this experience brings people from all over the place to come back to St. Paul's, and it's a joy to welcome you today. Please join me in a prayer. For the morning light and the irresistible dawning, for your untamable utterances of life in boundless stretches of space, and the strength of the waves of the sea, we give you thanks. Release in us the power of your Spirit that our souls may be free and our spirits may be strong. Release in us the freedom of your Spirit that we may be bridled by nothing but love, that we may be bridled only by love. Amen. Amen. So last week I mentioned that the speaker series, the Lenten Lunch and Speaker Series, has taken some twists and turns over the course of the years, especially during and since COVID. Last year, we traveled with Sadiqa Johnson through her novel, Yellow Wife. The year before that, we had artists and poets come and speak about their experiences. And last year, you may remember that we had Janelle Washington here to talk about the stations of St. Paul's, which were commissioned and shown for the first time last year. Those are available for you during the season of Lent, for you to pray and to walk. But through all of the years, through all of the decades of the series, we have had the same mission: to cultivate a loving community, to create space in which we think about our lives as spiritual human beings that share responsibility for one another and provide a tasty meal and offer hospitality. And that brings us to our 2023 topic for this year: Around the Table, a spirituality of cooking, eating, hospitality, and hanging out. For centuries, communities and civilizations have been shaped around food. What happens when we eat together? Why do we make such a big deal of it? And why are so many of our sacred texts about a spirit of welcome? Is there something holy that happens when we gather around the table? I think that there is. And for the next 4 weeks, we're going to spend time talking to local artists, chefs, and entrepreneurs who have dedicated their lives to the food and beverage industry. And my hunch is that for them, there is something deeper going on. Today, our speaker is Lance Lemon. Lance is a Virginia native, actor, co-founder of RichWine, and 2011 graduate of the University of Virginia. Lance moved to New York to continue his acting career and bartended at Jean-Georges ABC Cucina and Kitchen. Cucina soon led him to a role as a wine sales rep for Frederick Wildman and Sons, where Lance learned a tremendous amount about wine. He went on to curate, open, and manage 2 successful wine shops in Brooklyn, and the experience defined his 2 life passions, acting and wine. I am so happy to welcome Lance into our sacred space this morning. Please help me welcome him.
All right.
Got your microphone on?
Got the microphone on. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm getting used to this thing right here.
Test. We call that the Britney Spears mic. All right, Lance, welcome. Welcome to St. Paul's.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Lenten series. We're so glad that you're here.
This is beautiful.
Let's start with just a little bit more about you.
Yeah.
Say a little bit more about you. Where were you born?
Yeah.
Why you're in Richmond? All that.
100%. I am originally from Mechanicsville, Virginia, so not too far outside of the city. I call myself a country kid. I literally grew up in the country. I spent my summers in Richmond. My sister was part of VCU. She worked on the VCU athletics side, and I would spend camp in Richmond. And so I had this kind of city life and also, and would go back home to Mechanicsville. So I got the best of both worlds. But yeah, that's where I'm originally from, in Mechanicsville, but call Richmond home.
Okay.
Completely, yeah.
But you migrated to the to the north for a little while, right?
Migrated.
So I'm sure, tell us about your latest acting gigs.
Oh, whew. Well, I am in this, it's funny, I am in this interesting stage of auditioning. I audition about 3 times a week. This is where you see where actors give up. let's just call it what it is.
Yeah.
I moved to New York in 2014. And it was time for me to get to New York, for my manager was in New York, my agent is in LA. And I traveled to New York with my theater company in high school. Well, the theater kids, not theater company. We were theater kids.
You said you sang here once, right?
Yeah, we did. I did show choir at Hanover High School, and we performed here with our male and female ensemble. And I was trying to think the last time, and I think it was the first time that I was here. And it's bringing back surreal memories because I remember the pipe organs, and I was standing back here on this row and just looking up. I was like, oh my gosh, that is just amazing.
Yeah, you don't see those every day.
You don't see those every day.
I do, but most people don't.
Well, I realized that I was like, I have been here before, because I know there was one time I was just back there not singing, and I was just staring at those pipes like, those things are massive.
I know. I have to tell a story. I used to, on my birthday, my organist, I would walk into the church, and it was like, wah, 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 wah.
Yeah.
So just one of the perks of like having a pipe organ,
having a pipe organ
nearby.
I love it. I absolutely
Anyway,
love it.
this is back to you.
Yeah. No, this is fine. This is great. This is going good.
Acting career.
Yeah. So my acting career it's been a blessing. My last film that I did was actually shot here in Virginia. It was called Loving. I know a lot of people have probably got to see that. And I played Davis, Cousin Davis. It was Ruth Nega's the main lead actress in that. And I played her cousin in that movie. It was a simple role, about 12 lines, so don't blink and miss it. But it did really prompt another level to my, that's probably my agent calling me, telling me I need to
hope so.
Get to this audition.
You're hired.
Yeah, I'm waiting for that call. But it prompted me to really continue to work harder for my acting career. I've been doing it since I was a child. I was a childhood actor. There was an old movie with Harry Connick Jr. that was shot in, don't date me now, about 2003, called Mickey. And I did that. That was my first taste of film and TV. But I studied on the stage, double majored in acting and studio art with a focus in cinematography at UVA. So, I knew that the stage was a life, but I knew that the money was in film and TV. And it's a passion. It's a real love of mine, and something that I'm waiting patiently to for that next break, that gig.
Nice. Good luck with all that. Let's talk now a little bit about your business.
Yeah.
Tell us, you opened RichWine RVA during the pandemic.
Yeah.
With the hopes of having a shop, right? So talk about that journey a little bit.
Yeah. So when I was in New York, I was bartending, and actors, we call it survivor jobs, and I knew that I didn't want to bartend and serve for the rest of my life, and I got picked up by a company like you mentioned called Frederick Wildman & Sons, and I sold wine in New York for about 2.5 years, and mind you, I didn't know anything about wine really. I knew that I could sell as an actor. I knew I had a good way of talking to people and kind of selling and being a salesperson, but didn't know much about wine. So I sold for 2.5 years, and then I went to go help 2 people open up wine shops in Brooklyn. In that whole interim, my best friend, her name is Kristen Gardner-Beal. She couldn't be here with us today. She is originally from Mechanicsville as well. Spent time in Utah. She's in the banking industry and also lived in New York as well too. This plan for us was never to follow each other. We just kind of happened to end up at the same place all the time. She went to UVA a year after me and naturally kind of navigated to my friend group. I moved to New York in 2014. She moved in 2015, just happened to live down the street from me in Brooklyn. And I could swear that Kristen was just following me everywhere that I went. But Kristen would come visit me at my wine shops in Brooklyn for free wine. Let's just call it what it is. For free wine. But Kristen is a world traveler. She has traveled her whole life, spent a lot of time in South Africa, and she started her own company called Go Wine Tours. It was a wine tour company that she had started. And we had this idea of, when I was sitting in my wine shop in Liquid Assets, and that's what the wine shop was called, she was like, man, we should open up a wine shop. And it kind of clicked to me right there. I was like, yeah, this is something that I would really enjoy doing, is opening up a wine shop. And so over the years, basically from like 2017 to 2019, nothing really serious, but just kind of threw out these ideas. And more of the conversation started to happen of, would it be something that we wanted to do in Brooklyn, or would it be something that we wanted to, possibly do in Richmond? So Rich Wine is my brand and is my online wine delivery service. It started with the hopes of opening a brick-and-mortar shop in Richmond, and lo and behold, COVID. So Kristen and I literally built a website in a week, and threw all of our wine online. And as you all know, a lot of people were not traveling or leaving their homes, and we took off. We were literally delivering wine across the state. Like, people were just drinking and enjoying themselves, and
developed some habits during COVID,
developed some habits during COVID, 100%. But it was a beautiful thing, because we're a COVID-based built business. It established a brand for us. It established our name a little bit. And it was just a message to kind of let us know that maybe it wasn't the right time to open up a wine shop. And, I'm glad we didn't, because obviously COVID, and no one was really looking to open a brick and mortar kind of space then. But the online concept really, really took off.
Yeah.
And I say all that because it led us to where we are today, which has allowed us to open up our physical brick and mortar wine shop, which is on 405 Brook Road, which is called Penny's Wine Shop. It's a Jackson Ward wine shop by RichWine RVA. And we have light foods, tapas style menu, wine by the glass, wine that you can buy by the bottle. And that's where we are today with everything. Yeah, it's a long story, but in a quick kind of just right there, that's it.
Yeah. And clearly we're in a spiritual space. So
100%.
I want to kind of begin to turn the crystal a little bit and talk about wine.
Yeah.
Like, what is it about wine for you that made you want to have, to kind of dedicate your life and build spaces for it? Is, one of the things that we do every single Sunday is we have communion,
right,
and we offer wine.
Mm-hmm.
A teeny weeny little bit. But there's something about it.
Yeah.
What is it about wine for you?
First of all, I love to drink wine. Let's just, call it what it is there.
Yep.
For me, it's the conversations around wine that really kind of started to ring home to me. I would, like Kristen would come into my shop, and we would have good conversations over wine. And people would come in, and it was a very organic conversation to be able to just have like natural conversation. Like, wine to me just brought everything together. Wine and food. I remember just my times in Brooklyn and in New York, just having these wonderful, and still now too, having these wonderful dinners where people would just bring bottles of wine, and people would bring their dishes, and it just really just built this sense of just community and friendship, and for me, wine, besides the buzz aspect, it makes you, it gives you a little bit of just freedom and just relaxes you and calms you down. Obviously not overindulging, but it just allows you to have this space where you feel like you can speak freely. And I could get more into the physical kind of part of it. When I came back from New York, the first thing I knew I wanted to do was actually get my hands dirty. Like, I know wine, I can talk about it, but can you really get into the vineyard and really start to understand, the roots of it? No pun intended, but And that's one thing that I also really, love doing. I grew up outside. I loved being outside when I was a kid. And to this day, I still love just being out in the sun and getting to work in the vineyard and spend time around vines and people that are passionate about their land and farming. It just something really, really clicked to me.
Do you feel connected to a culture or to a past? Because clearly it's an ancient beverage.
Yeah.
I think beer is the oldest beverage. But anyway, do you feel connected to something a little bit more ancient?
Yes. Yeah, I definitely do, and I think that is starting to happen a little bit more as I become more involved in wine making and learning more about, like I said, vineyard work. You can feel, you can definitely feel history. I definitely feel connected to the past. I used to watch. This is just funny. Game of Thrones. I don't know if anybody's a fan here. But a huge fan of Game of Thrones.
I watched them all.
Yeah, me too. And it was just so interesting to me that me and my wife would literally get a bottle of wine, go to the local store, get a bottle of wine, and go watch Game of Thrones. And I just there was something about the ancient time of them drinking wine that just made me wanted to drink more wine. Like every time they would sit there and it just seemed to be such use this term lightly, an everyday thing to them, but that they would do for, meetings and dinner and whatever else they were doing back in those times. But I definitely feel connected to the history of it, especially as you start to look at wines from old world, like Europe and France, and even the Georgia, going like Eastern Europe. You start to see how they're making wine, and it's got this amazing history behind it.
Yeah.
There are these wines called orange wines. They're skin contact wines. They're white wines that are made like red wines that are from Georgia, the country of Georgia. And they make these wines in these old clay pots that date back centuries. And they're called cuevres. And they're literally about 25 feet tall, and they bury them in the ground. They're made of these clay amphoras. And just every time I learn more about wine, you start to learn more about the history of it and how long it's, been around. Even here in Virginia, you think about your founding fathers that came and planted grapes in Charlottesville and around Monticello, and you go there and, you can just feel it. Yeah, you can just feel it.
Yeah. And of course, I do need to have a disclaimer here that when we talk about wines, we're also including the non-alcoholized wines, right?
Right, 100%.
So, it's... And then they're out there, and they're getting a lot more.
Low alcohol as well too is a very big thing right now. I think people are being a lot more self-conscious about what they're doing and how they're intaking and indulging, and they're looking for an outlet. So definitely non-alcoholic as well too.
Yeah. But there is something about gathering. It kind of removes the filters. It slows things down. You're allowed to just, I think, connect with people. 100%. Now, in one of the articles that I read, there was a comment about you not wanting to be a wine salesman.
Yeah.
Right? You kind of wanted to be more of a wine storyteller.
Yeah.
So can you say a little bit more about that? Because I think there's a distinction there that might drive to what it is that's at the kernel of maybe a spirituality around this, or some sort of connecting point. Yeah.
I think for me, when I was a wine sales rep, I hated everything about it. It actually, it wasn't my path, like, to sell wine, because one, I didn't know about it enough. I wasn't well versed in it yet, and so selling wine, and especially in New York, it's massive. I got to eat at some of the greatest restaurants in the world, and I had some of the top accounts, that people would go see, but I just wasn't the best at it because I didn't know enough about wine. And for me, it was a lot about reading more about wine and just kind of like trying to log it into my brain, almost like I would do with acting, like just trying to memorize a script in a sense, where I would just kind of read back what I was like learning on the page. But in that time, I did start to realize the story behind every bottle. There's a story behind it, and it's not just the bottle. It's It's the winemaker. It is the cellar master. It is everybody that works in the cellar. It's the vineyard managers. It's the story of the distributor, that person that buys the wine from that winery, then goes and sells it to, the importer. The importer that buys it from that winery, then goes and takes it to a distributor to sell to a store like myself. There were so many layers and stories behind each one of these that I really just enjoyed telling other people's stories about wine. And it connected me to them in a sense that was just, it was just freeing in a way, like it allowed me to put other people on a pedestal, right? Like it allowed me to show that this person is working super hard for something that may not be super beneficial or financially gaining in a sense, but these guys are working their tails off, or women or people are just working their tails off for something that they love. And that to me just really struck home, because I do everything with a passion. Do it with passion, or don't do it at all. That's the life motto that I kind of live with. I do that when I make my bed, when I brush my teeth. Now that I have two little ones.
Stay out of your way in the morning.
Yeah, right. So, but and the passion, the storytelling behind it, is very big, especially when it comes to wine. There's so much wine out there. There's a ton.
There was another comment that you make, and here in the church we throw a word around called stewardship. And stewardship is about caring for others. How do we care for others? And I think that's another thing that happens around the table, and when we come together, it's being in honest, open space with each other. And there's also ways that we are stewards of the earth,
right?
Stewards of our neighbor. Like our relationship is important. You are my neighbor. We are each other's neighbor. In the bio, it says that you're interested in small, low intervention, biodynamic wines, right? Can you talk a little bit about that and why that's important to you, and especially say, what in the world does biodynamic mean?
Yeah, right. So in New York, I fell in love with the natural wine scene. It is a scene it's been around for, since wine, like a Game of Thrones. Let's talk about it like that. That's the way I like to think about it. It's just really crushing grape juice, letting it ferment, and then you have wine. Natural wine is a way of very little human intervention as possible, nothing really taken away or added to the wine, low sulfur in your wine. It's just a very holistic approach of just keeping it very simple. Organic is no pesticides, no hermesticides or chemicals in your vineyard and or your winery. Biodynamic follows the biodynamic calendar. They follow biodynamic principles. It's basically a way of everything that's coming out of the earth is going to go right back into the earth, right? It's kind of like compost, if you kind of think of it in a way. You're really trying to utilize everything that you have without having to take away or add anything to it that is quote unquote fake or altering in a sense. And so, for me, going back to kind of like our last point, it was a lot of the local smaller wineries or what kind of drew me to their story, right? It wasn't your big name brands like you would find in your Kroger or your Total Wine. It was the smaller niche wineries that I kind of wanted to pick out a little bit, because they were doing these really cool, interesting things and really weren't heard of as much. Now, natural wine is taken off. It's a very big scene. It's got its own kind of agenda now. There's natural wine websites. And so for me, that was the big thing, was just really taking that niche of what I really liked of the natural, organic, biodynamic wines and really just pushing it more out there. New York is big on it. Richmond is starting to get a little bit more of this kind of natural wine scene. Nice. And it's a very uplifting kind of thing, because there's a lot of people that are interested in this kind of style of wine. A lot of people say, oh, these natural organic wines don't give me headaches, or, the sulfur is what does it. And I tell people very lightly, no, it's everything in moderation. You can drink a bottle of natural wine and still have a headache the next day. And so, but it allowed me to kind of, meet other people in this lane that I was in, and cool. Start this business. And it's kind of taken off, and now you're starting to see more kind of fun wine shops like myself and others that are doing this.
So it's something we could be curious about and maybe go ask around.
Yeah, and it takes you on a journey.
Yeah.
You get to learn something new about these wines and wines that you may have never really heard of or thought to even try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, in some of the question in our pre-game show type of questions,
Right.
You mentioned faith.
Yeah.
I would like to hear, did you grow up in a family that had religious practices or ritual practices, spiritual practice? Did you kind of grow up in a religious home?
I did. My family is Baptist, and we grew up Southern Baptist. They're from Gloucester, Virginia. My grandmother is 96 and now living at my home with my parents. She's getting elderly, but every day till this day I go see her, she makes sure to say, asking if I'm praying. Ask just to make sure I'm praying. I did grow up in a family full of faith, and my mother and father always just wanted me to be a believer in God and just do the right thing and make the right choices and keep a steady head on my shoulders. I spent my Mechanicsville Christian Center was the church that I went to as a child. I still to this day, read my Bible and practice as much and talk to the Lord. I spoke to him a lot this morning with these two children that I have. And it's just kind of funny that I'm sitting here today because, they were on me this morning and I needed a little break, and it's good to be in here and realize that this is where I needed to be today. To 100% need to be here today. But I wrote in there one of my favorite quotes, which is faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, Hebrews 11:1. And it's something that I learned in college with the fraternity that I pledged, which is it's an historically black fraternity, but a very faith-based fraternity. And it's something to me because I'm so constantly wanting things to happen now. Like it should have happened yesterday. And I sit back and realize that nothing happens overnight and that you do have to have faith to really know that it's going to be okay.
Yeah, building a business, that'll test it, right?
Ooh, yes, it will.
Now, speaking of obstacles, I want to talk about another, one of the questions I asked Lance, what do you think is interesting about you? I tried to get people to think about, and this is what he said. A black man in wine is always intriguing to people.
It's always intriguing, yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah.
We laugh about it. I don't know if there was obstacles, if there have been obstacles. You as a person of color in the acting business, in the wine world.
Yeah. When Frederick Wildman and Sons hired me, they were very clear about needing diversity. They were an historically all white men kind of buttoned up, suit company, and they had a phenomenal wines, and they were having trouble breaking into, more diverse parts of the city. And, so I was I think I was the first black male to work for Frederick Wildman and Sons. And I never forget my first meeting. I walked in with a blazer and a Biggie t-shirt and was like, I'm ready to be here, ready to go, ready to go. There is not a lot of BIPOC representation in wine. It's just the facts. I think
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because we as people of color weren't brought up on wine. To say, my mother used to drink sweet Zinfandel and things of that nature, but I never visited vineyards when I was a child. I never went to wineries. That wasn't just really in my forte. Like even going to UVA, didn't really do it even in college that much. And it's something for me that I just wasn't really exposed to at a younger age. One of my favorite winemakers, her name is Natsiki Bayela. She's a South African. She's the first South African female winemakers. And she started this project called the Pinotage Project. And it puts people of color, young people of color, into the vineyards, into the wineries. Because there's so many things that go into wine, right? There's so many jobs that you can get out of wine, not only in the winery, but logistics, the financial side of it. And for me, it was watching her kind of start that Pinotage Project really kind of lit a little flame underneath, not a flame, a little light bulb in my head that was like, oh yeah, that's it. I think more younger people of color need to start to not drink wine, not saying that, but just learn about the business of the alcohol industry as they kind of like get forward, especially in their high school days. And yeah, that's, you know, I hope I answered your question correctly there.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting because it makes me think about, you know, if I were to write a thesis question or a book about, you know, whiteness, privilege, and the wine industry.
Right.
Because I'm sure it's all tied in there together, would you say?
Yeah, I definitely would say it's all tied together in there. And you kind of start to see that when you would go to spaces where there was wine, there weren't a lot of people that looked like you. I never forget going to a portfolio tasting in New York. It was at a beautiful space. It was probably 400 people maybe in there, and I could literally count on my hands the amount of black people that were in there. And one of the older gentlemen that was of color came up to me, and you know, he had a few glasses. He had been tasting, and he kind of just whispered. He was like, look around. He was like, you stay doing this. He was like, no, you know, you got to stay doing this because we have to continue to spread the love for people of color being able to be in this industry. You know, we can't be the only ones in here 5 years from now. And that really stood out to me because I was like, wow, you're right. You know, remind y'all, I hated selling wine at this point in time, but he really stuck something in my head where I was like, yeah, you're right. We're underrepresented here. And we need some representation in the wine world.
Yeah. Y'all remember Falcon Crest? You remember the show Falcon Crest?
Uh-oh. I don't remember.
It's all white people.
Oh, yeah.
In the wine industry.
Yeah. I mean, even the movie Sideways, I think there were people who got the bad taste of Merlot, you know.
Yeah, that was a big movie for the wine business.
Big movie for the wine business, you know. But yeah, there wasn't a lot of people of color, and now there are now more people starting to realize that, and it's taken off a lot.
Yeah. Cool, good. I would love to open it up to you. Maybe 2 or 3 questions. Does anybody have a question that they would like to ask Lance?
Don't hurt me.
These are not rehearsed. So, anybody?
I just wondered how you came up with the name for your wine shop.
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. So, Rich Wine is just basic. My name is not Rich, obviously, it's Lance. But Rich Wine is basically simply Richmond wine. And Penny's is a really good story. Maggie Walker was the first female of any color to own her own bank in 1902. She is historically known for Jackson Ward and grew up in Jackson Ward. And her first bank was called St. Luke Penny Savings Bank. And Kristen and I decided, I threw the name out to Kristen, Penny's. I was like, what do you think of Penny's as a name for a wine shop? And she was like, where does that come from? And I was like, well, Maggie Walker's first bank was called Penny Savings Bank. You work in the banking industry. It's kind of funny because everybody thinks that rich is like, you know, rich wine, like expensive wine, you know, and then Penny's is kind of like pennies, like it's like a not rich, it's just more pennies. And also we like to think of our space as Penny's as being a space where we all invested kind of our time and efforts into it. And so Penny's is started, the space used to be Stoplight Gelato. I don't know if anybody knows that space. It's right across the street from Gallery 5. So we do gelato as well as our chef. His name is Emmanuel Baden, and he is the curator of our food. And then Kristen and I do the business and also the wine. So it was us kind of taking our businesses and investing it into one space like a bank. And so hence Penny's Wine Shop. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. Yeah, thanks for asking that question. I don't get to tell that one enough.
Awesome. Who else has a question?
Unfortunately, I'm not a drinker any longer. However,
okay.
What is your favorite wine?
Ooh, my favorite wine. Right now, my favorite wine is Virginia is growing Petit Manseng. It's a very up and rising grape here in Virginia. Virginia, I got to give you really quickly. Virginia is halfway between California and halfway between Europe. Virginia has this extremely interesting climate when it comes to making wine. We have a lot of winemakers talk about how they prepare for climate and what they get is weather. We get you all know it, it can be 100 degrees sometimes in August. We get April frost. Y'all can look at the weather today. It's 45 degrees. It was 75 2 days ago. It's crazy. And so Virginia's climate is constantly changing. And so you're starting to see a lot of winemakers actually move from Europe, from California to come to Virginia to make wine. I don't know why, but I think it's because they like a challenge. And with that, with that being said, Petit Manseng is a grape that is very small with very thick skin. It originates from the southwest of France in the Cahors Valley. And southwest of France gets a little bit of heat. And with this grape, Petit Manseng, it can withstand a lot of heat and also a lot of rain. So basically what I'm saying is that you can have a very terribly farmed vineyard and still make really good Petit Manseng. And so it's doing really well for us here in Virginia to make these very bold wines with high acid. You can make bubbles out of it. You can make like a semi-deck, which is like a sweet wine out of it as well too. So it's very versatile, and it's just doing really well in Virginia. And I just think more winemakers are starting to see that. So that's what I'm passionate about right now. But
cool.
That's my favorite one.
One more question.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation today. This has been very enlightening.
Thank you.
My question is, what time does the wine tasting start?
And right about now. No, right about now. No, I'm just kidding. I will tell you this. We are open Wednesday through Saturday at Penny's, 2 to 10 on Wednesday and Thursdays, 2 to 9 Wednesdays and Thursdays, 2 to 10 on Fridays, and 12 to 10 on Saturdays. So any one of y'all, if you just mentioned that you came to the St. Paul's Lenten series, I would love to give you a little splash of something, and especially you.
Nice. Maybe next year.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
All right, y'all, we need to wrap it up. Next week, we got Michael Lindsay. He is the owner of several restaurants, Lily Pearl, right down the street. So we're excited about having Michael next week. If you ordered lunches last week, it should be ready for you in Scott Hall right now in the atrium. Don't forget that you need to place your order today to reserve your lunch for next week. If you'd like to make a contribution to the series, that would be most appreciated. And there are places to put your $100 bills back there on the beside Barbara Holly. Lance, thank you.
Thank y'all so much for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you, Charlie.
And now, friends, remember that life is short and we do not have much time to gladden the hearts of those with whom we share this beautiful journey. So make haste to love and be quick to be kind. And may the blessing of the Holy One rest upon you all in this moment and forevermore. Amen.
Amen.
Have a beautiful day.
Thank you.
You're welcome to greet Lance up here if you'd like.
I'm going to take this off. Take this off before I break it. That was great, Charlie. Thank you so much.